Hey, everybody. Welcome back to this episode of Think a Business Live. Looking forward to talking to John Lefebvre. John, it's good to talk to you today. And, you have such a kind of interesting past and an interesting story. When I read it, I wasn't even really sure what to make of it because there was so many different things. You were a lawyer, you're an author, you're a musician, you're a philanthropist, you're an environmental social activist. You hit a grand slam with an internet company. You've been in jail. You've been enlightened. So it's like we're almost going to be talking about consciousness, right? Raising consciousness, which
that's the center of it.
Yeah, which I'm a big believer that nobody's perfect, and the same level of consciousness that got us to where we are is not going to get us to where we need to be. But I want to rewind a little bit because you do have such an the elements that I get in the bio. It's such an interesting hey, summarize your life in 2 paragraphs and. But it seemed intriguing. And so I want to kind of rewind for a minute because it's interesting. I was talking to somebody, right before I got your notification, I was talking to somebody and I said, I want to interview some people who have actually been in prison to then discuss kind of the enlightenment and shift in consciousness, right? Because just because you were in prison doesn't mean your life, you're horrible. Anyway, it shouldn't only define you, right? And so there's so many stories of people you hear about, you're in prison and then they turn out and do so many beautiful things. And then I got your bio and I thought, oh, this would be an interesting discussion. But rewind with me, kind of the last 50 years, right? Like growing up, you was what?
I was 17 in 1969. The time I went to prison that you read about wasn't my first time. When I was 17, I was arrested for selling LSD and hashish to cops that were dressed up like hippies, and I wound up doing 8 months right when I turned 18. So that's the milieu I grew up in. I grew up listening to Bobby Vinton, and that quickly changed into The Who and Jethro Tull. So it was a crazy time to be alive, and things were blowing wide open. And I was fortunate to be right there on the doorstep of it. So that was formational for me, and always has been. I think I don't think I've learned too much important in my life that I wasn't exposed to when I was 17. I've understood them more profoundly for sure. But I was a Catholic.
But I have a question for you because in 1969 I wasn't born yet. I was born in 1972. But when you're 17 years old, right? Our brains aren't even fully developed till we're, I think, like 23-ish. And when you're 17 years old, what and you're in prison for 8 months, what does that do to your character? What does that do to your confidence? Like, where do you feel like, hey, this is a life-changing moment, or are you a victim, or are you what role are you playing in that moment?
It was humiliating for me in some ways, and in other ways it wasn't, because I sort of felt like a bit of a political prisoner. I didn't really feel like that I had broken any profoundly moral code when I was selling hallucinogenic drugs to kids my age and older. Other people take different views about that, but I think you realize, don't you, that people are now more widely admitting the benefits that certain experiences that are inspired by hallucinogenic drugs help us with. There's people that got PTSD and stuff, have wonderful recoveries, that involve mushroom therapy and things like that. So anyways,
there was actually a very interesting thing on 60 Minutes, I think, did a whole piece on that, where people were who had been struggling for years. I'm not a doctor, I don't claim to be, but on 60 Minutes, they kind of dove a bit deeper on that. Yeah.
So when you ask me about going to prison, it's kind of both times I went to prison, John, I don't think I really, neither time did I breach anything that was profoundly immoral. I didn't feel like I'd committed any dishonesty offenses or at all. I did break laws, and that was fundamentally all I did. When I was arrested when I was arrested the last time, what it was for was this business that operates like PayPal with respect to online gambling, and and it was that was the part that stuck in Uncle Sam's craw. But the fact was that when I was arrested for that, 48 of the 50 states were operating gaming themselves if they weren't licensing out to others. And so there was something a bit strange. So, if governments did it, it was great tax policy, but if individuals did it, it was a pernicious vice. And, that was a rationale that I never quite got justified for myself. And so I'm not at all shy about having gone to prison. I'll tell you what going to prison did for me. It showed me that the guys that wind up in prison are not the worst guys in the world. Generally speaking, my take now is that the guys who are the worst ones in the world don't go to prison.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Most of the guys I met in jail in New York City and Manhattan were, well, first of all, they were black. I was on a wing with 96 people. I was in the same institution that Epstein woke up and found out that he had committed suicide. And the same thing, they were holding El Chapo in there. So all of the guys, I was with 96 guys and 84 of them were black guys. And it seemed like that's the way the whole building was in a way. And, I got to know some of those guys. I'm still in touch with a couple of guys from there.
Yeah. It's interesting perception. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say it wasn't humiliating for me. It was humiliating for me as a member of our society that became sort of a general humiliation on behalf of all of us.
Yeah. So what did you do with that? How did you channel that?
I want us to, reconsider justice and fairness, and the way that we deal with people, the way we deal with, of course, race but opportunity, mostly opportunity in our society. I think one of the things that took, being wealthy helped me to concentrate a little bit, John, on all of the benefits that we have in our society, the ones that we take for granted, even those of us that aren't particularly wealthy. We are compared to, I met a guy once when we were traveling in India. He was an old Swiss guy, and he said, there's two ways to get rich in the world. One of them is get rich, and the other one is spend 2 nights in India. And if we sit with that for a moment, that's pretty profound, and it's true because we are super those of us who are privileged in our society are privileged beyond all measure, really, and most of us white guys are quite privileged in our society. We're not all out, golfing and making $1 million a week golfing, but, on our investments or whatever. But even people at, the lower income levels in our society are quite privileged compared to most people in the world. And we feel like we're entitled to those things that you and I take for granted, the things that we take for granted in our day-to-day life, security and respect, reasonable access to food, clothing, and shelter, reasonable access to the tools of self-improvement, education, to healthcare, reasonable access to justice and finance, and last but not least, reasonable access to a healthy environment. We take most of these things for granted. And then the next thing you think about is, well, not only do we take them for granted, we almost implicitly think they're entitlements. But the next thing you want to think about is, what is there to distinguish us from all others who aren't so fortunate? And that's a tough one to answer. And my answer the only answer I can come up with is nothing. There is nothing to distinguish us. We all have the same. We'll talk about this more as we go on, but this consciousness that we are conscious beings in the universe, and every one of the starving lady in the desert in Somalia, with the baby dying at her dusty breast, is exactly like us. She has the same capacity to dream, the same capacity for disappointment that we have. And I think the only thing that does distinguish us from her is that we've actually got all this stuff and she does not.
It's so interesting. Yeah, it's so interesting what you're talking about. I years ago with my shul, I was part of a leadership group, and we went to Washington D.C. and New York, and we visited homeless shelters. And then when we came back to Detroit, we had a 2-week shelter at our shul, and I was one of the co-chairs. And all of these people that were homeless, I got to know many of them. Mm-hmm. And it was real eye-opening for me, John, because I realized that there was zero difference. There's the 5% that were, just whatever they were, but 95% were just like me, except they didn't have a family to fall back on if something went wrong. And I thought to myself, we are all 1 or 2 steps away from being homeless, because many of their stories were very similar. They lost their job, and then they ended up in the hospital for something, or and they missed a couple of days of work, and then they lost their car, and it was it just made me wake up that these were financial planners, these were insurance people, these were hardworking people that just fell on bad luck, and the ripple effect ended them up to be homeless.
Or postmen that got a bad back. Right. They're normal guys. If you met them fishing, you wouldn't know the difference.
Wouldn't know the difference. But I want to rewind for a minute, because I want to, through your journey, at your height, because right before we went online, you had made a comment on this, but and you said it earlier, at your height, as you referred to yourself as wealthy, how wealthy were you at your height?
Well, we floated an IPO on the London Stock Exchange, the AIM board, that wound up attracting capital of about $2 billion.
Yeah.
And our market cap was around $2 billion, and I own 27% of that.
Okay.
So I had I say about 300 million or so.
Okay. And the reason I ask is because to just kind of bridge into something else you're talking about, whether it's 300 million, a market cap of X amount, whether it's whatever it is, what's the responsibility of an individual, of a human being, when you come from or have privilege?
That's a big question, and the answer is really
it's a really big question. And I often think about, like, if I were ever to meet Warren Buffett or someone of that, I always want to say, like, what responsibility do you have, does an individual have, when you have so much power?
Let me start at this point. I think since we were kids, we were taught that freedom is very expensive. It doesn't come free. Indeed, the price we have to pay for freedom is the highest price, they told us, didn't they? The highest price was, offering up our lives to defend our freedom. And that's sort of true. But I actually think, John, that the cost of freedom is much higher than that. Let me tell you what I think. I think that if it only is giving up our lives to defend free, only 1 in several 100,000 of us ever has to pay that price. The rest of us get it for free. So that didn't make sense to me. I think actually the cost of freedom is that every day that we live in freedom, we owe a duty to strive with all our might to assure that others that are less fortunate in the freedom department get it too. Yeah. Everybody knows that, but it's time for us to reconsider it, because it's a very, very fundamental thing. What's freedom? Well, freedom is actually that basket of rights, entitlements that you and I take for granted, integrity, access to food, clothing, and shelter, access to the tools of self-improvement, those sorts of things. And those are a public responsibility. They're not an individual responsibility. I think we should all be contributing to make sure that everybody gets to school, and everybody gets healthy, and everybody's got access to basic health, and everybody gets access to a healthy environment. And so what are the responsibilities of wealth? Well, the responsibilities of wealth are to contribute to that in fair measure. I'm going to jump right to the core of it here, John, and tell you, I think for a couple hundred years ago, us rich guys have bamboozled all the rest of you into thinking that you only tax income. You only tax income. You don't tax wealth, right? Everybody knows that, right? I mean, if you tax wealth, then you're taxing income twice because you've got the income and it was taxed and now you're going to tax it again. But I don't think that's right. I think what that leaves us with is that your average working guy who's paying taxes on all his income, he's the one who's supporting the institutions of constitutional democracy that make it secure for us wealthy people to hold our money securely. The banking systems, the communication systems, education systems that educate all the people that work for us and make us wealthy, the medical systems that keep us from getting sick, all of those things more or less come on the backs of income earners, right? And those will get taxed. So I think wealthy people can afford, maybe not Elizabeth Warren's tax, but something like it. And they never even know. If we tax the guy that's got $52 million, if we taxed him on $2 million and taxed him 2% like Elizabeth is proposing, it's going to wind up being about maybe 10 to 20% of his growth on that wealth. And that kind of money, the kind of money that Elizabeth Warren is proposing, 2% on people above 50. I don't know if those are the right numbers. It might be 1% above 50.
Right. Overall,
2%. And it might, should probably be progressive. But that's going to wind up being enough money to provide everybody with child care, elder care, health care, education to whatever level you want, and all of those things that you and I take, the advantages that we had, and so that the responsibilities of wealth are the responsibilities to not bitch all the time about having to pay taxes. What we should be doing rather than bitching about paying taxes is working really hard to make sure that our taxes are spent responsibly. That's what we should be doing.
Yeah, no, that's well said. I want to talk about giving for a minute because sure. I know philanthropy is a piece of something that you do. And I think a lot of times people think about giving. So these are very big topics that I think many people often think about it. But I think a lot of times people often think about it that they will make their mark at the end of their lives, right? Like, here's kind of my life. Here's what I'm going to earn and do. I'm going to get my kids through college. I'm going to get my this, that, and the other. I'm going to have a savings of X. And then when I'm 65 or 70 years old, I will give to, X, Y, and Z. It's kind of like the end of the life. But if you rewind that, how does somebody and it doesn't have to be, I'm not suggesting every day, but how does somebody from your lens and from how you're talking about incorporate giving into the flow of their life, right? Whether it's giving back of their time, giving back of, I'm a big believer, and I think we saw this a lot even once COVID hit. You saw charities who were like always looking for the big donors, all of a sudden, realize that all the small donors add up, right? $5 to $10 and things of that nature. And so today, I think the shift is, and I think the millennials and the Gen Zs are doing a great job of this, because when they're interviewing at companies today and or starting companies, but when they're interviewing at companies, they're saying, what social action do you believe in? How are you giving back? And a lot of these seasoned companies, many of them already do, but to the ones that don't are thinking, wait, you're interviewing me on how I give back? It's a total shift, but they're doing the universe a favor, and they are raising consciousness on changing the definition of giving. And so just kind of walk me through your lens of that.
I would start, if I was going to try to justify it to somebody, John. I draw attention to the dividends of spending money on oneself. The rush it's a little bit like dope. We become a nerd to it, and we have to spend more and more to keep getting the same rush, and eventually even that doesn't help. I read about it in a book, by the way, the dope thing. Let me tell you this story quickly. I ran into a lady on the internet, on Facebook, who I had utterly forgotten. And she said, John, 10 years ago, you saved my daughter's life. I said, what? And I honestly didn't even remember this woman. But I said, please remind me what happened. She got in serious trouble in Ecuador and she needed to be evacuated and we couldn't get her out of the country. And you sent $5,000 and we evacuated her and we got her into the hospitals back home in America. And so the dividends that come from being generous get magnified throughout your whole life, and they keep coming back to you. You know, you were talking to Carl Stabe the other day about gratitudes and how important it is.
Great? Wasn't Carl great?
It was beautiful. It was wonderful.
I just want to give him a plug real quick. Digtofly.com. He's got such an amazing way. You know, and I was thinking, like, as you're talking about earlier about, people not giving or realizing that we all need to lift each other up. You know, the wealthy have a responsibility to provide, so people who don't come from wealth have an ability to rise up faster. And I think sometimes we have so many people have such fear of actually losing everything. It's like, it gets in their own way. But digtofly.com is like this great way that Carl has, this kind of like self-healing tool. Mm-hmm. So I just want to give a little plug. So yeah, I appreciate you taking time to listen to that.
Yeah, he was, and he was very good about gratitudes and the return. The return on generosity is that you're actually creating gratitudes in others. And when those people are feeling grateful to you and it comes back to you, that comes back in a way that never, ever ends. You never lose the rush of that. When people express their gratitude to you. So it's a dividend that actually gets better. It doesn't pale. It gets better and better. There's lots of things that we can give in our generosity. Material is probably the easiest one to give, really. There's some people who think that, Jesus of Nazareth taught that, people who give alms are actually not doing much for their own spirit because they're kind of avoiding the more important gift. That is to, go and actually live with the people and try to heal them, live with them and try to help them and try to heal them in all the ways. So generosity of spirit, generosity of time is for sure. I can write a check. I mean, it doesn't take any, it doesn't take any, courage or strength or anything to write a check. What takes courage and strength is to give your time. And all these people who volunteer their time, that generosity is something that a rich guy can never match. Yeah. So, but still, the rich guys have a responsibility to contribute to the support of all the institutions of constitutional democracy, to give people a push up the hill. I'm not saying, John, when we were kids, we used to listen to the Beach Boys, right? And everybody was entitled to a Corvette. And, that's the way we grew up. Yeah. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about giving people the access to the tools to do something for themselves. One of the pet peeves I have.
I want to just comment on that real quickly because I think
go ahead.
One of the things I think that we can give all people is dignity. Yeah. And give with dignity. And I think that's really important. I interviewed her name is escaping me right now. It'll come to me. Sure. But it's a nonprofit called the Empowerment Plan, and they provide sleeping bags for that turn into jackets for homeless people. And so I interviewed the owner on my show. Her name is escaping me. I'm gonna maybe try to Google it while we talk. But one of the things she said in her story, which was amazing, was that when you're doing things and when you're talking to people who are homeless, look them in the eye, because a lot of times people don't look people in the eye, and when you look them in the eye, you're giving them the dignity that they need. And what makes them feel so out of touch is when you look down at them. And I thought that has stuck with me. Victoria Scott, she's the CEO and founder of the Empowerment Plan, empowermentplan.org. That always not only stuck with me, but haunted me, because I would do that. I would give to homeless people on the street, but I would not look them in the eye. And it wasn't, I thought I was doing them a favor, not, but really it was about me. So I just thought it was so eye-opening. So I just think that that's, the dignity element, I think, is important. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, it's all fascinating, and I'm really intrigued to meet a lot more of your guests. I'm sorry I've only been through 2 or 3 of them so far, but it was really great. The generosity of wealth. We have to. I really encourage people who are as fortunate as me or more to understand that when we share and help people develop their own tools of self-improvement, we actually make them more productive. And that adds to productivity, and that is growth. And that's what makes us all wealthy. I think actually, this might call me a dreamer, right? But I think wealth is infinite. And I think the more productive we make everybody, the more wealth there's going to be. You don't spend money being generous. You earn money being generous. But you earn something better than money. You earn gratitude, and it's the most precious thing, the most generous thing. You earn people's attention. The most precious thing that we can give people is their attention. The thing that you're giving me right now is the most precious thing.
Absolutely. My father was a dentist, John, and he never turned a patient away. And if somebody couldn't afford dentistry, my dad would put them on a payment plan that worked for them. It could have been $5 a month, $20 a month for 5 years, but that's what he did. And so it has always haunted me that as a business coach, and I work with people all over the country, that to work with me one-on-one is it's an investment. And I never liked when people said, I can't afford you, because my goal is to open up the platform of business coaching for over 1 billion people, to get them unstuck, to get them thinking big and being consistent. So because of COVID and the way learning was changing a little bit for many people, I started a coaching group with live weekly coaching and a private Facebook group for $50 a month. Because I wanted to make it affordable to everybody in the world, because everybody can afford, most everyone can afford invest in themselves $50 a month. And the learning is huge, and I'm loving it. And I say that only because what you're talking about is, I think we all need to come up with ways to open up everything, because someone can also go to my website and get everything for free, right? So you can go to my website and get everything for free. You can do one-on-one custom, or you can go to this class at a nominal price per month and earn a ton. But I think we're going to start seeing many, many companies, and we're seeing it in Masterclass for $180 a year. You can go to masterclass.com, I think it is, and you can learn from all of the greats. They have classes, and classes. And so then it's about people just spending the time to actually invest in themselves.
I heard a story about a guy in Malawi who has a little shop, and the only thing he has in his little shop is an iPhone. And people come and they pay him it's like one iPhone in Malawi is an internet cafe. And people come in and they pay for whatever they pay for half an hour, and they get to send emails to their whatever that they do the important work they have to do. So this is how you develop people. You bring them the capacity to communicate, the capacity to self-educate. We talk about the responsibilities of the wealthy. I'm going to give you a little aphorism I came up with that I think might sort of help point a finger at it. Those of us who accept the benefits of freedom but are careless about others who are less fortunate, could not care less about others who are less fortunate, have not earned their freedom. They've merely taken liberties.
Yeah. We are all on this earth to rise each other up, to raise each other up. And I think and it starts with awareness. And so my last question before I move into a speed round is, what can people do to raise their awareness, to raise their consciousness, to get centered and understand and be grateful for what they have around them, and realize that they have, the ability to help others rise?
Let's go back to an idea that Carl came up with, Carl Stabe. And he said, well, actually, when you were speaking to Anahid Derbabian.
Oh, yeah, she was great, wasn't she?
Yeah, you said to her, we are not our thoughts. And one of the things that Carl came up with was, well, schedule, for instance, journaling, or if you'll recall, right? Schedule,
Oh, yeah, sure.
make a ritual of your journaling, sort of a thing.
Yeah.
I think that's a really great idea, but I'm going to say one of the really important things that we need to do to get where you're going there, raising consciousness, is to schedule doing nothing. Schedule doing nothing. So the part of us that dreams at night, John, doesn't go to sleep in the daytime. The part of us that dreams at night is the center of our creativity, and it's there all day long. We distract our consciousness with all of the things that we pay attention to in the day, and most of them are important on a scale, and on a certain scale. They are important. I don't diss them, but please don't overlook the importance of uncluttered mind. So one of the things I do is I think of thoughts as being, at certain times in the day, uninvited guests, guys that come and knock on your door without asking first, right?
Yeah.
They're like clients without an appointment.
Right.
Right. I made a haiku about it. I'm gonna change.
That's great.
I made a haiku about it. It goes like this: do nothing with thoughts. Thoughts know what they can do and may F off any time.
That is great.
So sit quietly. The thing I say in my book, All's Well, Where Thou Art, Earth and Why, is be still, yet still be.
I love it.
And just let this magic within you rise, and pay attention to it, and look at it, and just dig it and groove on it for a while. You can scribble down the notes later. Just be for half an hour and watch what happens. Watch what comes up.
Yeah. I love this was fun. This was fun talking to you, John. I want to do a quick speed round, but tell everybody real quickly about your book.
My first book is called All's Well, Where Thou Art, Earth and Why, and it's a discourse. It's through all of these thoughts that I've been sharing with you, our place in the universe, how grown up we are, and how young we are at the same time, how far we've got to go, and it starts out by saying that people thought that my life story was very interesting and that I should write it. But I very quickly got tired of writing sentences that start with I and end with me, and rather decided I would write the story of us all, which is, that's a pretty lurid story in itself. Yeah. But it's my take on what we are and where we've got to go. And, we've got a long ways to go, but it's our burden, but it's also our blessing.
I love it. All right, quick speed round, John. You ready?
Sure.
Favorite book and why?
James Joyce, Ulysses, because it goes right down to the very core of what it means to be a human being in the very most common sense.
Best piece of wisdom you've ever received?
Be generous.
And finish this sentence. One thing everybody can do right now to raise their level of consciousness is?
Be quiet for a moment and see what comes up.
And fast forward 100 years, what do you want your legacy to be?
I want my granddaughter's kids to say, geez, that old guy was pretty smart.
Okay. That's a good
one. Book. That's what I want my legacy to be.
Yeah. Tell everybody how they can connect with you, John.
JohnLefebvre.com is a website that's under reconstruction right now, but you can look at my books there and find out where to get them. I've recorded a bunch of records when I was out on bail in Los Angeles, and they're 2 double CDs. One of them now is up on Spotify and all the streaming services. The other one will be up by next week. So you just look John Lefebvre up there and you can hear all the music. And on Facebook, there's a so-called page that I run called Thoughtful Species. Thoughtful Species is about current social and public affairs and what we might do to look forward to our marvelous future. All
right. Well, I appreciate you being on the show. Think Community, thanks so much. John, you're an interesting guy, and I appreciate your time. And I always love talking about the power of raising our consciousness. So thank you so much. Think Community, thank you so much. John, hang on the line for a minute, and we'll talk to everybody soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.